Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. Radnor Studio 21 is all about engaging the communities the station serves, particularly when residents have the opportunity to express their feelings and opinions about important issues that affect the quality of life in our township. So although the station takes a neutral position in national, state, and local elections, I'm free to interview candidates of my choosing, just as I do in selecting people whom I interview that interest me and I hope will interest you. My guest today is Jake Abel, Republican candidate for the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners in the 6th Ward, a seat now held by Commissioner Don Curley, the voice of reason in many instances in partisan disputes, who also serves his constituents admirably and has served them admirably for the past 8 years. In the interest of full disclosure, I live in the 6th Ward and have been impressed by the way Jake Abel has waged his campaign over the past several months. Jake, welcome to 30 Minutes.
Rick, thank you.
Delighted to have you here. You are an impressive young man. You've got an impressive background, and we'll get into all of that. In the few weeks left before the election on November the 7th, what's your feeling about the campaign?
Great question. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear on the show. I've watched many of your shows.
You have?
I have.
Wonderful.
And you do a great service for the township, and you keep residents informed, and our community works best when residents are engaged and informed, so I appreciate the work you do.
I think the station can take credit for that as well with all of the other programming, but thank you. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I want to touch on Commissioner Curley for just a second. As you mentioned, Commissioner Curley's decided not to run again, and I want to thank him for his 8 years of service to the township and to the Radnor 6th Ward. We're all better for Don's work and his leadership within the township. And I also want to thank his wife, Carol, for giving him the ability to help the township.
His long-suffering wife. Right, as yours will be.
Hopefully, hopefully. But to go to your question on the campaign, these last 8 months have been exciting, and I've really enjoyed getting out into the 6th Ward and meeting my neighbors and talking about issues that matter to them and listening to their experiences in Radnor. And at this point, we're 4 weeks out from the election. I'm really excited and energized, and I'm pleased with how the campaign's progressed over the last 8 months. And just to touch on a couple of key things that I look at and when I talk about success of the campaign is, when I started, I identified a couple goals that I wanted to accomplish. One, talk about the issues with my neighbors. And over the last 8 months, I've knocked on over 1,200 doors, talking one-on-one, and I appreciate every neighbor that's invited me into their house and offered me a cup of water on a hot day or just to get out of the rain or the cold weather. And those relationships will go far beyond this election, and I value those friendships that I've made. I've also wanted to run a campaign, a positive campaign, and I've done that. I've stuck to the issues, and I've been optimistic, and we live in a great township, and we're all neighbors, and everybody that's vying for the commissioner spot, they want to do what's right for the community. We just may differ on ways to get there. And so, I've run a positive campaign, and I'll continue to run a positive campaign through the election. And then, the third thing is, just getting the message out there. And I've done it in a few effective ways: Facebook, Twitter, and now I have a website up. So I've been able to communicate, not just by knocking on doors, but talking with residents and with neighbors through social media. And then I want to go back and, the real optimism comes from the response I'm receiving from neighbors. A third of my signs going into the primary were on homes, were on yards where at least one of the residents was not a registered Republican. So that tells me that my message is resonating throughout the township and throughout the ward. I've also been able to engage the younger voters. Villanova has invited me out twice now.
Very important, yes.
Invited me out twice to talk to students, as well as Valley Forge Military College. This past week, a number of those students were out in the 6th Ward waving signs, and they're going to start canvassing. So they've bought into the message, and they believe in the message, and I'm really excited to have them part of the campaign.
It's difficult, I would think, in an off year, any off year election, but particularly when it's a local election. People tend to look at screaming headlines about what's going on, what candidates are saying. In your case, this particular campaign, what are the issues that you're focusing on that you believe are important or should be important to most of the residents of the 6th Ward and the township generally?
I think you're right. I think, based on recent trends, this election will have lower turnout than last year's national election. But I suspect it's going to have higher turnout than if you look back 2 or 4 years in off-year elections. And I expect higher turnout for a couple reasons. One is you've got issues going on in Washington, D.C. where people have concerns, I have concerns, we should all have concerns, and that's opened up the dialogue within the community. So I expect to see some more people show up in an off-year election based on those issues. And then my sense going around the ward is that there's some frustrations with the Board of Commissioners, and it's how it's being addressed by commissioners, and certain issues and stories that have come out recently where you have ethics charges, previous commissioners that are being brought up on charges. So I think that is energized the community to come out because now they have a vested interest. My parents always told me growing up that voting is you vote because if you don't have the right to complain or to raise concerns. So I think everybody is going to take that into account this year.
I have to admit, Jake, that I wasn't paying very close attention to what was going on in the township or the 6th Ward until the Willows issue surfaced. And at the time, it looked as if the commissioners were about to sign a 15-year lease with a nursery school to take the Willows, effectively take it over, and therefore limit, if not eliminate, public use of the mansion and certain parts of the park. That's when I became interested, and my neighbors became interested.
Right.
Talk about the Willows, because as you know, that issue has not been resolved yet. Thousands of dollars have been spent, and it looks as if, at least there is some speculation, that depending upon Commissioner R's status as a member of the board, we may go into next year with still an unresolved issue. The board has been kicking this can down the road for over 6 years, and because of the minority vote, have not been able to come to any record. And in my opinion, you didn't ask for it, but in my opinion, we've spent thousands of dollars simply out of sentimental attachment to a building that has no historical significance, no architectural merit. It's simply that it's there and it's 100 years old. If we were a real corporation, that asset would have been torn down because it's a liability and it's costing us thousands of dollars just to have it sit empty. What am I campaigning for? It's your turn.
Well, I appreciate the question, and the Willows over the last 8 months has been a priority of the 6th Ward, and there's a couple different issues that the Willows is part of. One, we're talking about the Willows Mansion, and a second issue is cell service around the Willows.
Yes.
Let's address the Willows Mansion first. As you stated, it's been empty for the past 6 years, and that frustrates residents. It frustrates myself and my family. We want our kids to enjoy the park. It's the largest park in Radnor Township. People hold it up as the symbol of,
it's beautiful.
Of the township. So we'd love to have access to it. I really think at this point we need to thank the residents who have come together to form the Willows Park Preserve and the efforts they've put in to get us to this point. One of the values I've run on over the last 8 months is protecting our parks from commercialization. And what I mean by that is, when you talk about the nursery or the caterer coming in there, that's commercial activity.
Yes.
There's significant deed restrictions that prevent that and wouldn't allow that to happen to begin with. So that's going to run into a dead end, and we're going to be back at step one. So what the Willows Park Preserve has done is they put a plan forward where they would open up the mansion again to the community for primarily residential access, and that's what the residents are asking for. And I am supporting of the plan. I would love to see the Willows back open and accessible to the residents of Radnor Township. The concern I have, and that many of my neighbors have, is the cost that was associated with it. I was glad to see at the last meeting that the plan has been scaled back And I mean, there's still some cost issues involved there that'll have to be addressed by this board and probably the board that's sworn in January. And I look forward to having that opportunity to look at the funding for that plan going forward. But at this point, I think it's the best plan we've seen so far over the last 6 years that gets that brings the Willows back to Radnor Township.
Yeah. I would characterize it as an optimal plan. I'm not happy with all of it. I still don't see spending millions of dollars, taxpayers' money, even with the very generous donation by an anonymous donor of $1 million because of his love and appreciation of the park. It just seems to me it's an awful lot of money.
Well, I think
to put the building back in shape so it can be rented out to help pay for the operating costs. In my opinion, the township should not be in the hospitality business or the real estate leasing business, but we'll see.
Over the last 6 years, we've been in the business of paying hundreds of thousands of dollars
absolutely right.
just to keep the building closed.
That's right. We shouldn't have been in that business either. Okay. The other related issue has been towers, cell towers. As you know, in our part of the 6th Ward, there is no tower, and so cell service is spotty at best. With one carrier, it doesn't even exist.
Right.
And so people have to buy a tower themselves or whatever they call those things and put them in their homes. But while this debate has been raging because nobody wants a tower in their neighborhood, certainly not in a park, there's these absurd-looking things that are supposed to look like trees. The technology has moved on, and we now have alternative solutions to solving the problem. The mini towers, they're on a number of utility poles in the township. Do you see what is the solution to that problem? We need cell service. As you know, the argument is in the park itself, it's a safety hazard because there's no service.
Sure. So let me again pull that question back and kind of attack it from the beginning of my campaign. After I announced, within days, I had a couple neighbors call me to want to talk about cell service in the 3 neighborhoods around the Willows Park, and I met with all the neighbors, and I've been out in those neighborhoods on multiple occasions. And in fact, if I look at the houses I've hit over the last 8 months, I've spent probably the most time in those 3 neighborhoods because I know this is a serious issue and it's a big concern. I'm opposed to cell towers at the Willows Park, and it goes back to one of my values, which is protecting our parks from commercialization. Putting a cell tower is commercial activity, and again, it would run up against those deed restrictions, and it's an illegal act, and we'd be forced to court to argue those points. And you rightly point out that the rest of the township has gone to what we have microcells, and they're little pods that go on top of utility poles and in areas where you just don't get good cell service. Those help as extenders. We have them on South Devon that help our neighborhood, and they're all throughout. Like I said, they're all throughout Radnor Township, and I've seen them go up all over. I've seen them in Tredyffrin, I've seen them in Lower Marion, so they're widely used now throughout the area. And I think that is the technology that's best suited for that area, and I've supported the plan put forward by Commissioner Curley, Commissioner Clark, and Commissioner Booker that would push those newer technologies like microcells in that area to help out. I do want to address one issue that's been brought up by proponents of cell towers, and that is the safety concerns at the Willows Park. So if you have, and I went down with Commissioner Clark to Delaware County Emergency Services, and we talked with the officials there about this issue in Radnor Township in the 6th Ward. So right now, if emergency first responders go into the Willows Park, there is a safety concern because they're not able to make calls out. So they have to go to the next highest point before they can call back into the county. As commissioner, I would continue that dialogue with the county to look at ways that we can resolve that issue in the park, but to commingle those two issues of cell service for the neighbors and safety for the park. You don't need a cell tower in the park to put a safety antenna up. You just need to find the right spot to put the safety antenna up, and that's what I want to work with the county commissioners on. And the project at the Willows, I'm told that they're looking to put Wi-Fi there and maybe a police call box. So that's another opportunity where we may be able to address the safety concerns at the Willows Park with the county.
You've also, another issue that you've talked about and written about is transparency. You're a proponent of televising all public meetings of all committees, et cetera, in the township. I can appreciate that, and I certainly would agree with the need for more transparency. But simply televising meetings and making it accessible on the township's government channel doesn't necessarily mean that the community will be more engaged because they have access to meetings. What else do you plan to do to encourage more participation, more engagement?
Well, I agree. But it's a starting point, and it's a big step to bringing the community back into the know. And as I said in the beginning, our community works best when we're engaged and informed. Right now, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the equipment and the township building to hold those meetings. I'm a member of the Shade Tree Committee. I think it's important that those meetings are televised on TV. So, a working family, take mine for example. I go to the Shade Tree committees, but I'm not able to watch or attend every committee meeting throughout the week or the month. Having them televised and put on YouTube, it allows me the opportunity to go back.
They're not televised now? The Shade Tree?
The Shade Tree is, but there are some committee meetings in the township that are not televised. And so, and if I'm not able to make those, I like to watch them on YouTube or live on public access television, so I can keep up to date with issues, especially if those issues pertain to Shade Tree issues that we're addressing.
You mentioned your family. Let's get into some of your personal history. You're married, 4 children, 4 small children. Obviously, you live in the 6th Ward. You have a day job, I think. What is that? What is your background? What's your experience?
I appreciate the question. I've been fortunate enough in my professional career to do jobs that I love and would want to do for the rest of my life. And there was a time when I came home and my wife says, why do you smile all the time when you get off work? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, well, you know why? Because you've never had a job that you don't like. And that profession I chose is public service. So for the last 15 years, I've worked as a foreign policy advisor for the Speaker of the House, a professional staff member for the House Intelligence Committee for the U.S. Congress, and as an intelligence officer for Defense Intelligence Agency. And providing information and intelligence to decision makers to protect the country and our interests overseas. Those jobs, that's a job I would have held throughout my career. But there was a point where Christy and I, we had 2 children, and she had an opportunity to pursue her career, and it made sense that for the family that that she had that opportunity to go after a job that she really wanted, and so I transitioned from the public sector to the private sector, and so now I do consulting for the U.S. government and foreign governments on national security issues. So it still keeps me involved in foreign policy, just in a different way. You have a responsible job. You've got a lovely wife. You've got 4 great kids. You have the picture of them in your campaign literature. Obviously, they're very important to you. Therefore, wonderful life, wonderful kids, wonderful marriage. Are you crazy? Why would anyone, with all of that heavy schedule and those responsibilities, take on the additional responsibility of shouldering the problems of everybody who calls you, emails you, wants a light fixed, wants something fixed, wants something done? All the time you have to put into research issues so you can make informed decisions as a member of the board. And then somehow untangle the impasses that the board, the commissioners very often come to for maybe not always the right reasons. Nonetheless, why would you choose that? It's a question that I've asked myself over the past 8 months. But this process has really been, a team process. I wouldn't be able to do this without Christy's support, and I'm very fortunate that she's been there every step of the way. She's given me guidance. She's offered her suggestions. She's asked why I didn't always take her suggestions, but I really have appreciated her support, and I don't know that I would want to do this if she wasn't right there helping out. And then the kids, they're excited about this experience too, and we've made it a learning process. And the moment that I'll always remember was right before, it was in April, before the primary. And we're driving around, and Benjamin, he's our third oldest, he was 5 at the time, 4 at the time. He was sitting in the back seat, and he says, "Dad, there's a sign that says elect Jake Abel. He's got the same name as you." And so we thought that was cute, and they understand what we're trying to do now. And at dinner the other night, Eli, who's 6, asked, "Why do you want to run for commissioner?" And I told him, it's important. Mommy and I think it's important that we give back to the community in any way we can. So when we moved here, Christy's been part of the Wayne Elementary PTO. I'm a member of the Upper Mainland YMCA Board of Advisors. I'm on the Shade Tree Commission. And when this opportunity came with Commissioner Curley deciding not to run again, I thought this was a great way for me to use my experience bringing different groups together to solve really important issues. Not on the national level anymore, but I mean,
Yes.
and it's actually more rewarding. It's on a local level, and it's going to impact my family and our neighbors and our friends.
Radnor Township, for all its affluence and all the resources it has and the wonderful assets it has, is not immune to the fiscal crises that are confronting other municipalities, large and small. What's your feeling about what Radnor has to do to avoid a fiscal crisis, going right over the edge because of overcommitting, because of reaching a point beyond which taxpayers are going to say enough already, no more taxes?
Yeah, and I think we're starting to hear some of those grumblings through the township now, and some of that came out with through the Willows project. We've got a lot of issues on our plate for the coming years. Stormwater, the MS4 plan, the Willows. There's a lot of big ticket items. So we really have to go back and look at the priorities and start ranking them as priorities. And I always, when I go around and talk to people, I like to tell them, my philosophy is not every project's a good project, and not every good project is worth funding now. So if commissioners decide that one project is essential, we may have to start looking at pushing other projects off, so we're not borrowing as much as we have in recent years. I've heard Commissioner Curley talk about that phase between 2014 and 2015 where we borrowed $18 million. Hindsight 2020, and we knew we had all these big ticket items on the forefront. I don't know that borrowing $18 million would have been the right decision at the time.
You're right, with the benefit of 2020 hindsight. Let's pretend for a moment. So you knock on a neighbor's door, somebody in the 6th Ward, and they see who you are, your little pamphlet in your hand, so it's obvious you're there to campaign, you're a campaigner. And the household person, man or woman, says he's very courteous and thanks you for coming, but evidences no interest in you or your campaign or anything else. And so they take your pamphlet, they thank you for stopping by, and close the door. What do you do? How do you handle that?
Well, thankfully,
That hasn't happened?
I have not, out of nearly 1,200 homes that I've gone to and visited and talked to people, that's probably happened a handful of times. And going in that's a likelihood.
Yes.
Especially if somebody sees, well, one, they may think I'm a solicitor coming to the door.
Yes.
They may not realize I'm trying to campaign for a commissioner. But for the most part, the overwhelming majority of the people I've talked to, whether Republican, Democrat, agree with me, don't agree with me, they've listened. And we've had a great dialogue. And we may not agree at the end of the discussion, but they've given me the time, and I'll always appreciate that experience. And it's probably the thing I'll take away from the campaign experience is that opportunity to meet with people. Now, when I'm talking to people, and we have that discussion, I try to put, let's put national politics aside.
Yes.
There's a time and place for that discussion, and we should all have it because, like I said, we should all be concerned about some of the things happening on the national scene. What I'm trying to do is do what's right for Radnor Township and talk Radnor issues. So, and that starts the discussion, and then we just start talking. it's been worthwhile, and I really appreciate it, and it gets me excited every time I go to a house and I have a positive conversation, and gets me going to the next house and keep going.
Leading up to November 7th, this has been a life-changing experience, as you've already indicated. Is there a single lesson you've learned either about yourself or about government or about people that you can reflect on now?
Yeah.
That's a big question.
It is a big question. The lesson I've learned about myself is, it's important to be honest with people. I think I've always been an honest person, but when you're talking to people about what you want to do, your values, and how you want to impact their lives, I think you have a real responsibility to be truthful with them. I'm not out there attempting to pander for votes. I'm attempting to give an honest opinion of where I see what the values I see, the platform I want to run on, and the changes I hope to make if elected commissioner. So, I mean, that part of it is important, and it's a important lesson. One of the things that I'll always remember is just the educational experience with the kids, and
Yes.
talking to my 4 kids and teaching them about giving back to the community, and it's something I hope they'll remember and they'll carry on through their lives.
What have you learned about the people, the residents, the voters?
The voters, they are smart, they are educated, and they know the issues, and they ask pointed questions, and I suspect they will vote on November 7th on a candidate that they think has the right vision for the future, because they've invested here in Radnor Township. They've invested in their family living here, and they want to see a candidate go up there and represent them. I like to end a lot of my emails to neighbors and just say, your voice matters. I've come to your house, I've listened to you, and a lot of my plans and resolutions to solve these issues are based on the comments I'm hearing from you, and I've left it as an open-ended invitation. If you want me to come to your house, send me an email, call me, I will be over there and we'll talk.
Does your campaign now, 4 weeks out, does it kick into a higher level of activity as well as engagement of other people who are part of your campaign?
Yes, there are a lot of moving pieces.
I've been involved in some political campaigns in the past.
There's a lot of moving pieces at the moment, and I suspect going up to Election Day, I mean, those activities will continue to speed up. So what I'm doing, I'm continuing going door to door, calling constituents who I haven't been able to contact with one-on-one, supporters who have asked and come to me and asked, how can we support your campaign? Those signs will start going up this weekend on yards, and they're making phone calls. They're talking to neighbors. The students at Villanova and Valley Forge, like I said, are out and about in the ward, going door to door, reminding people that
That's great. That's
reminding people that November 7th is the big day.
Good deal. Well, I wish you well. It's important to all of us that we have good, high-quality people making decisions that affect all of our lives. So, Jake,
Rick,
best of luck.
thank you for the opportunity.
I guess all we can say to you folks who are listening is, regardless of how you vote, what is important is that you do vote. It's a right and a privilege, an obligation we all have as citizens of this township, of this country. My guest today has been Jake Abel, Republican candidate for the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners in the 6th Ward. Once again, we encourage you to get out on November the 7th, rain or shine, and exercise your right to vote. Until next time, this is 30 Minutes. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves.